Welcome, everyone. I'm sorry for the delay. I know you've been looking forward to meeting our speakers and the event itself. It's been an adventurous last few hours for me and Havin. We're running around the city trying to collect some books, which we failed to do. But hopefully, our friends will. We delegated the mission to them, so. Welcome again, and it's my pleasure to welcome Havin Guneser and Harriet Friedman today here, who will be talking about introduce and be talking about the Academy of Social Science, its communes, and its journal Democratic Modernity, which you can find on the desk in front. And if you can, we prefer cash payments, but if you cannot pay with cash, there will be an email address provided for Interact. The talk offers an accessible entry point into democratic modernity as a horizon of hope rooted in feminist struggle, community, self-organization, transnational solidarity. So I don't want to keep you waiting, but I want to introduce our speakers. Havin is an engineer by training and a longtime women's freedom activist. She was one of the spokespersons for the International Initiative for the Freedom for Abdullah Öcalan Peace in Kurdistan, for a long time an organizer of the Network for an Alternative Quest conferences. She has translated Abdullah Öcalan's books into English. She's on the advisory board of the Genealogy Journal, writes a monthly column for Nevaya Jin, and is the author of The Art of Freedom that was published by PM Press in 2021. Harriet Friedman is a food system analyst, writer, and lecturer. Since retirement from the University of Toronto in 2012, she freely pollinates worlds of academia, policy, and activism across scales of organization. Beginning at the intersection of rural sociology, geography, and world systems, she has progressively engaged with natural sciences and explored different ways of knowing. She understands world history since 1500 as intertwined histories of commodity frontiers, monocultures connected to global cities, on the one hand, an evolving place-based food base created by diverse peoples in their shadows. She looks to the future by exploring transitions to regenerative ways of inhabiting places in the earth, to renewing biocultural landscapes within Gaia. And briefly about the Academy, the Academy of Social Science, founded in 2025, is dedicated to the study, research, and promotion of integrative social science, the sociology of freedom. They see this as an integral part of the struggles to break the current society side and create a world of collective freedom. So please welcome me. Please join me in welcoming Havin and Harriet. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Every day here seems to be with a lot of surprises. Especially, I guess, I'm not so used to living at -5, 10, 15, 30, -30, and etc. So a big respect for everybody who is, living exactly living here under these winter conditions.
I'm sorry to do that to you.
Yeah.
But some people might have some trouble. So
Okay.
Can you use the mic?
Yes, I can.
Yes. Sorry.
So
Thank you.
But despite the deep respect, I think I will not be coming next winter or any winter. So thank you very much, and thanks to Bengi and everyone at Concordia, Shift, and all for having us here tonight, and all of you for being here. Actually, the establishment of Academy is quite timely, we would say, because we observe and live through a very critical and important historical threshold. Perhaps the people in the Middle East is experiencing that very, very firsthand. But for the past 20 years, actually, the Kurdish freedom movement has been calling what we are experiencing a third world war. And they've been indicating that this process has begun with the collapse of the Soviet Union. So the conceptual framework has been laid in Abdullah Öcalan's work called The Manifesto of the Democratic Civilization, which we couldn't bring you despite all our attempts. The DHL has not delivered it yet. So I'm sorry that they are not available here at the moment. We are now at the process of renewed division and brutal recolonization of the world, of peoples, of women, between global forces of capitalist modernity, which not only includes the US, EU, but also Russia, China, and others. So this battle is first and foremost given in the Middle East in order to control the much needed resources and trade routes by capitalism, characterized so far, maybe in the West, by a process of decay and collapse of the international law, as well as other legal, institutional, and organizational structures of capitalist modernity that was the result of the two world wars and our own struggles of peoples, workers, women, everyone around the world. In this context, especially in the Middle East, we can talk about three main groups of actors with different interests and objectives. First, there is the global powers led by the USA, and to a lesser extent, China, Russia, that form a dominant bloc and are trying to reshape the Middle East and divide it amongst themselves. Since the early 1990s, the US initiated its intervention with what it called the Greater Middle East Project in order to fill up the vacuum that was left after the collapse of the Soviet Union, so that it could control the region's resources and trade routes. Now, the second group of actors consists of the existing nation states in the region, in the Middle East. They are resisting this intervention, but not by transitioning to a more democratic way of governing, but becoming even more genocidal, even more oligarchic, and in bed, on and off, with several of these global forces. So the resistance is against the dismantling of the 20th century order of Sykes-Picot, especially by Turkey, Iran, Iraq, and Syria. And then there's, of course, the third actors, which are the social forces. And today in the Middle East, these are primarily represented by the Kurdistan Freedom Movement. With the development of the paradigm of democratic modernity, which is defined by democratic confederalism, democratic nation, and ecological economy, Kurdistan Freedom Movement is formulating an alternative to capitalist modernity, including its nation state, industrialism, and nationalism, which is not only implementable in the region, but around the world. There is a huge confusion, of course, in the Middle East and around the world, who is doing what. And as a result, this confusion is leading them to become fragmented and not unified. But what happens in the Middle East, we know, will greatly affect and influence what is happening around the world. In order to further deepen the confusion and despair, we are told that there is no way out. We are told, maybe in the West, to hold on to the softer face of capitalist modernity. In the Middle East and everywhere, we are told to rally for the defense of the nation states, that nothing else has a chance to exist. In the Middle East, we are told either you have to be nation statist or you have to be in bed with USA and Israel. There is no other way out. and that if you resist, you await death, hunger, violence, and elimination. We are being polarized so that in this polarization, the different global powers can succeed. We are told to side with the powerful in order to continue to live without hardship. And I have to insist that you do not understand this only in the context of the Middle East, but also in the West and everywhere around the world. And we are told to sacrifice others for our own well-being. We are told that even in the event that we destroy our living environment, the ecology necessary for life and living, we can go and find life in the outer space. So no need to panic. There are other places to colonize. So to that end, just like the onset of capitalist modernity in Europe between the 16th and 18th centuries, there's an attempt to take back our common gains, change our mindset, the way we view things and the way we want to live. And these common gains, of course, were through the struggles of decolonization, socialism, women's freedom, workers' ecology, and many others. Each and every day, we are told, and I'm Kurdish, by the way, it might make a lot more sense. We are told there is no way out of this patriarchal capitalist modernity. So we must colonize, rule, extract, oppress, suppress, and exploit in order to exist. To this end, we are yet again being served with religionism, racism, white supremacy, misogyny. But what we are seeing is that it is not us, the people's women and men, the society that has an existential problem. It is, in fact, capitalist modernity itself that is facing an existential crisis and is trying to transition into something that we don't want to wait to see. We are struggling against, and it's dragging us along with itself. It is capitalist modernity that is unsustainable, and it is a state of war, a war machine, if you like, ever since its inception. Now it is at a crossroads. Today, therefore, is like the times of the First World War, offering us a chance to exit the system and to build an alternative. So this is why we Kurds, as hard as it might be, view what we are experiencing not only living in a time of threat, but also in a time of hope. Why so? Because we think we know so much more than we ever did, despite the attempted erasure and the wish for confusion. While the global and regional forces battle this out between themselves, they try to make us their own battles. We know this, and we're trying to expose this as we speak in our own communities. This historical moment presents all of us as individuals and communities that stand beyond capitalism and the state, a real opportunity to build an alternative. This instability that it is going through is what allows an exit possible. An alternative that provides a free life based on equality and solidarity for everyone and everywhere. The Kurdish freedom movement calls this democratic modernity, coined by Abdullah Öcalan. So the origins of the Academy of Democratic Modernity is rooted in a long history of the struggle for Kurdish existence, one could say. For those of you who do not know about this long history of the Kurdish freedom struggle, during the First World War, through colonial processes of partition and nation-state formation imposed on populations across the Middle East, Kurds and many other peoples suddenly found themselves to be minorities in the new states of Iraq, Iran, Syria, and Turkey. Kurds and others, to varying degrees, were seen as a problem for the nation-states, along with policies of cultural erasure through forced assimilation, as well as outright physical annihilation. Thus, the struggle has been existential from the beginning for Kurds. Even though armed struggle was a crucial means of survival, as no other venue of expression were given to the Kurds, the Kurdish freedom movement always emphasized political solution ever since 1983. Over the decades, the movement has shown tremendous capacity for adaptability, critical re-evaluation of its means and ends, and internal self-transformation, including just before and in the aftermath of the collapse of Soviet Union, the discussion of bureaucracy and real socialism was a huge topic, or the rapidly increasing participation by young women in the late 80s and early 90s in the Kurdish freedom movement initiated a critical discussion on the role of women within the movement and in broader Kurdish society. And as a result, women's liberation, women's freedom has become a pillar of the freedom struggle. This process of critical re-evaluation was underway in 1999 when Abdullah Öcalan was abducted by a NATO operation assisted by Mossad intelligence on behalf of the Turkish state and renditioned to Turkey's notorious İmralı Island prison, where he has now spent 27 years of torturous isolation. Öcalan nevertheless continued his search for solutions. He managed, though severely restricted by his jailers, to access books and other materials as part of preparation for his legal defense. Alongside works of critical theory like Adorno's and world system analysis like Wallerstein's or Frank and Gill's, Öcalan encountered Murray Bookchin as well, his writings on social ecology, libertarian communalism, which proved to be pivotal to his thinking. But along with these, the writings of Maria Mies, especially, on subsistence and also women's being the last colony, was also very important for Öcalan's rethinking. Öcalan's multi-volume manifesto of the democratic civilization can be read as an act of grand intellectual synthesis and the beginning of an open dialogue with individuals and movements across the world who struggle for freedom. The Kurdish freedom movement accepted Öcalan's proposal for the paradigm of democratic modernity, consisting of a non-state governance called democratic confederalism, democratic autonomy, and democratic nation in 2005. In 2018, the late Italian intellectual Antonio Negri expressed what Öcalan is doing in these terms. He said, Öcalan expresses a series of concepts that in the 21st century are increasingly becoming the building blocks for the political construction of a new world. These are the principles that have animated the revolutionary struggle in Rojava, in North and East Syria, which brings us back to the rationale for the Academy of Social Science. As the Academy, we believe that the theory and practice of the Kurdish freedom movement has already made significant contributions to a diverse global dialogue in struggle against the deprivations and pillagings of capitalist modernity. And we believe it can contribute even more. We believe that the philosophy and political thought behind the successes of the freedom movement calls for serious and sustained intellectual engagement. In the spirit of the revolution in Rojava, we view this academy and its journal not only as an intervention into contemporary critical discourse, but more ambitiously as a contribution to a radical reconceptualization of social science, as a vehicle of human emancipation, or what we would like to call the sociology of freedom. Now, much is criticized about the social sciences. And maybe most of you know about these already, especially its proximity to power, over the centuries has allowed academia, intellectuals, although not at large, we still have a lot of critical theorists and intellectuals who are rethinking how to struggle against what is happening. But this proximity to power has allowed capitalism to cover up all the problematic areas that it has developed, including industrialism, including extraction, including genocides. It has provided intellectual power to cover this up. The fact that social sciences are broken up into disciplines blinds us to the main contradiction. I mean, what is the main contradiction that we are experiencing? Some say it's the class, some it's the state, some it's something else. But we are not around the world, as those people or the organization that struggle have not come up and agreed on a main contradiction as the driver of the 5,000-year-old patriarchal hegemony over the society. So Öcalan is pretty harsh, actually, in the sociology of freedom. He calls those not the critical theorists, and I put them aside because there are a lot of intellectuals, academics inside the universities who are doing a good job. But those that do not, neither are maybe supportive of the state or, the capitalist modernity in general, but are really not doing something to come out of this coexistence. He calls them intellectual load donkeys. It's pretty harsh, I would say, but considering what we are going through, it is pretty appropriate at the same time. So the Kurdish freedom movement, and of course, as you know, many different organizations and people's movements across the globe are therefore trying to establish their own alternatives, their own academies outside of this official scientific community, but together with them. Our academy is one as such. It includes many people, many intellectuals, professors from around the world who are from the universities that you know. And they are taking part in this academy in order to be able to develop this mindset or the sociology of freedom that we might need or we do need in order to exit the system. So in defining social science, Öcalan says his ultimate goal is to develop the option of freedom. And on top of it, of course, we know that sociology is not and cannot be exclusively about freedom. It should also deal with prehistoric society, which, we've been told that they were reactionary and backward and, that nothing can be learned from them, etc. But the more we understand the past, the more we understand, what can really be learned to be able to build our future. And also to study hierarchy. I mean, Öcalan in his books, in his manifesto of 5 volumes, is really doing a lot of anthropology, actually. Anthropology of hierarchy, anthropology of state, anthropology of power, the city, the civilization, capital, This is why he sides with Andre Günther Frank and not Wallerstein, because he says capitalism is not 500, but 5,000 year old. And that we need to understand why it was able to come to power and rule in Europe. And he is opening that a lot. And I'm so sorry we couldn't bring the box full of books to you, because we had some of the books in there. But also, democracy, the arts, religion, philosophy. Öcalan looks at religion in the early days that it came about as social movements of their own times. He looks at mythology and learns from the history of those times, from the mythologies that are there. But of course, we should also look at philosophy, science, politics, war, strategy, organization, ideology, ecology, genealogy. Genealogy is a Kurdish word that means the science of woman and life. And a point where we differentiate from feminism is that we see this woman, the science of woman and life, all encompassing. We do not separate it from women alone. So we base it on women at the center of the commune, of the society, and the equality and the freedom is then determines how the society and the male is. So with this actually academy, we want to contribute and also add another academy to announce a future beyond capitalism. It may look, very too much of a hope maybe to do this, but we believe that there is a future beyond capitalism, the state, and patriarchal domination. I guess we believe in it because as the most downtrodden people of the Middle East that nobody even had heard of, maybe especially until 99, but then until the Rojava Revolution, but then until the Jiyan Azadi in Iran, and Iranian Kurdistan, that we have lived this. We have shown to ourselves that this does not have to be the way of living. So in fact, although capitalist modernity does not want us to see it, and at each and every time, of course, is trying to eliminate and destroy any kind of implementation or a show of such living, like in Rojava, for example. But we know that there is a diverse emancipatory social projects across the world, including the Zapatistas and including many more, even maybe smaller projects, but there are. Now, of course, the revolution in Rojava is among one of the most spectacular of these eruptions of the future in the present, of what Negri calls the building block of 21st century. Of course, capitalist forces are trying to show us that this is not possible. It is not possible for different religions to live side by side. It is not possible. This is why, it was ISIS first who attacked it. And now with the blessing of the Western world and the global powers, it is now HDS, the amalgam of different jihadist forces that has been legitimized and stated as the state of Syria. Now, we want this academy and journal to provoke and sustain a radical reimagining of social science as emancipatory science. And also what we want to do is to give a new dictum or a rubric to what some of the intellectuals or scientists that actually, brought up, like positivism, for example, like Bacon. I mean, I want to give the example of Bacon in this. He said knowledge is power. And he made everyone believe that, or almost everybody. Since we are here, we didn't really believe that knowledge is power. Or Foucault, of course, critiqued this with his power-knowledge dichotomy or his rubric of this. But what we are doing is we are beginning from a different emancipatory epistemological rationale. We are saying truth is freedom. Truth is not power, or knowledge is not power. That truth is freedom, and that it should be understood as a dialectical mutuality. Now, the historical development of capitalist modernity has truly brought us to the precipice of planetary apocalypse. This system, this world system, we see it as a war system, and that it is expanding violent conflicts as it takes the form of a third world war. So if we let it go unchecked, it could conclude in the disintegration of society as the system is growing at the expense of making society extremely dependent on itself. The total collapse of organized social life and the ecological basis on which it depends. Now, we call this society side. We say that the state, over the 5,000 years, grew at the expense of the society, which means that it monopolized everything that the society used to do itself. It began as an agrarian state, then trade state, and then as it grew, it began to take on the power of, or the monopoly over violence, made up armies, and nobody else could be, armed. It took over monopoly over the education. It took over the monopoly over nutrition. Harriet would be the best person to speak about that too, among everything else. So over the thousands of years, what we are left with is totally dependent on making social relations and also life itself and the sustenance of the living all became dependent on the state more and more. And maybe today this is why it's becoming more and more difficult to defend the society and to defend ourselves. because we are totally dependent in terms of housing, electricity, nutrition, education, health. Health is also becoming very fast privatized since the collapse of welfare states. But this doesn't mean that capitalist modernity cannot be overcome, because this is what we are told day in and day out. We actually here agree with Immanuel Wallerstein, his observation that in times like these, interventions are more important than at any other time. He noted that the free will factor will be at its maximum, meaning that individual and collective action can have a greater impact on the future structuring of the world than such actions taken maybe in more normal times. That is, during the ongoing life of an historical system. So today, we want to do just that. Today, the Kurds in the Middle East do not want to side with the global forces, no matter who they are, nor do they want to side with the regional colonial powers. But they want to use their power and strength in continuing to implement the bottom-up people's choice of a life and living based on women's freedom, radical democratic bottom-up structures, as well as ecological economy. So to this end, we believe that further, this is why a transformed and transformative social science is really more crucial than ever before against this death spiral of capitalist modernity. So the Academy of Social Science, founded in 2025, is dedicated to the study, research, and promotion of this integrated social science, the sociology of freedom, with its sole genealogy. We see this as an integral part of the struggles to break the current society side and create a world of collective freedom.
Yeah.
So we conceive the sociology of freedom as a holistic and open research program that values knowledges produced by social movements and communities in struggle, alongside more formal scholarships as well. We embrace the contributions of anthropology, archaeology, human geography, history, philosophy, political economy, sociology, political ecology, and many other domains of knowledge. But we reject the limitations and legitimacy of traditional disciplinary boundaries. So we are looking at a unitary diversity of knowledge. So I could go on and on, but I don't know what time it is. Have I gone on too long already? What is the time?
The right amount.
Okay. So maybe a bit about the roots of who we are. Since 1999, the work of International Initiative Freedom for Abdullah Öcalan, Peace in Kurdistan began. It was first to struggle against the death penalty in Turkey that was in place and that was waiting for Abdullah Öcalan. But after that, the international initiative more and more went into translating the works of Abdullah Öcalan, because we realized that not only after 1999, but also even before 1999, nobody knew actually what the Kurds were thinking, saying, or doing. Everybody thought that it was a traditional national liberation movement. Nobody knew of the critiques that was done to real socialism or the Soviet Union at the time, or to Cuba or to China or to, Soviet Union itself or whoever, in many different aspects, in terms of militarization, in terms of bureaucracy, in terms of women's freedom, and in terms of approach to different peoples. I don't want to use the term minorities. I don't want to use the same language as they are using. So we focused more and more, especially by 2012, we focused more and more on what Öcalan is saying. With translations, along with translations, we began to organize a conference called Network for an Alternative Quest. And we began to probe into, what were the mistakes, what are the remedies, or what are the possible ways ahead that are proposed by Öcalan and by the Kurdish freedom movement. So as we did this, we wanted to more and more put this into dialogue with others who are coming from different traditions from around the world, both including feminist traditions, critical theory, indigenous peoples, and also peoples from our own region. So we did 4 conferences every 2 years. With COVID, less a little bit. So we brought into discussion, actually, together with Harriet, many others that you will see from our website or from the brochures that are in the academy, the journal. 21 people from across the world who became the founding members of this academy. And of course, Bengi has also come to many of the conferences in Hamburg, and Shahrzad as well, actually. So there are a couple of people who know what we're talking about here for sure. So how are we going to do this? We already have, obviously, a lot of relations from around the world, both with intellectuals, but as well as with movements. We have now a venue where we can bring people together constantly. We are building both a physical and a digital library, and that will be needed for the research that we want to do. This will include oral histories, because this is one point of critique, obviously. We have the journal of the Academy, which is called Democratic Modernity, and you will find them on the table there. Please get them. It's the first issue. It talks a little bit about what we want to do in this first issue. Alongside these, we have the communes. Communes are the research groups that are researching different areas that we have just been talking about. Some of the current communes that we have announced are democratic civilization. We want to understand the history of the commune, which we call moral and political society. We call it moral because we see morality as the ability to make a choice. And we call it political because the society should have the power and the mechanisms to make its decisions, daily or otherwise. And it is based on mother-woman, as I said. It is based and built around the woman. So there will be another commune. There is another commune called Sociology of Freedom. We want to understand the methodology that also Abdullah Öcalan is proposing. A commune on peace. We want to give another definition of peace, not the one that is presented to us by patriarchal capitalist modernity, which means that you just surrender, and that is their piece. But we have another piece because with this paradigm, we see the main contradiction between status civilization and democratic civilization, or state against the commune. We see the main contradiction to be this. And there are a couple other communes, like the democratic foodways, which Harriet will be also leading along with Targol and others. We don't want to just look at the past, but we want to also look at what the past can offer, interweaved with our struggles today and the gains that these struggles have produced. And then the journal issues will be the product. I don't want to even say the product because it is very, profit-oriented. Not, the fruits of these communes will be presented in the journal. So we would like to make the journal also highly dynamic and not just repeating what is known, but also discovering together and then displaying what is or what has been discovered. And finally, of course, seminars and conferences on all these fruits, but also, finally, can we actually, begin to even think of a syllabus for the peoples, women who are struggling, workers, around the world? Can we imagine a common syllabus of some sort that we can all then come around to? At the same time, of course, we want to we are having analysis reports that will expose the present day policies and attacks on the society. And we find this to be very important as well. Finally, we are forging agreements with departments and of universities or universities themselves in general in order to support the struggles of the academics, intellectuals in their own spaces, but also, of course, to receive support from the radical intellectuals and academics that are finding it more and more difficult to keep the universities open to critical theory and these different struggles. We are also offering writing retreats. This sounds like a commercial right now. I'm sorry. Writing retreats for those who want to write fiction or nonfiction based on all these, the framework that we've been talking about. We are building an artist and language collective so that we may develop the sound, language, visuals, feelings that we think can constitute this democratic modernity. We believe our foundation is not too late or too early. We think it's here at the right moment. This is the time to not go with the dominant narratives, but to forge a way out of patriarchy, domination, slavery, exploitation, and extraction. Your contributions are the only way for its development. And this means both intellectual, time-wise, and participation-wise, and because this will be not a capital-driven academy, but a desire for freedom-driven academy. And really, how can we also, through this academy, not only involve movements and activists, but also how can we, with the knowledge produced with, for, together with them, how can we then be in solidarity and support of these movements that are, their lives are on the line. So we are very excited And we are very excited we are so excited that we are here in the worst winter with the fire we have. And we hope that we will have more occasions to not only, give you an introduction, but also to delve into the profoundness of what we want to do and do it together. Thank you very much.
All right, well done, well said. So I'm going to start by just holding up a copy for those of you who haven't seen it. Just the beauty of this image and the other images throughout. It's a departure from most academic journals, I would say, in relating beauty to thought, thought to emotion and spirit. I'm brought into this by Havin, particularly, and not just this talk today, but into the Academy, founding of the Academy, the journal. I don't know Rojava, but I'm interested enough in my advanced age, 13 years after retiring, to audit an undergraduate course called Introduction to Kurdish Studies. And I'm very honored to have been able to meet some people from Rojava at some of these conferences. And I'm aware that Kurdistan is barely noticed on the left in North America today. Earlier, I think it was more. It is certainly noticed by the great power politics, including the US and Turkey. So I'm honored to support this movement and its ideas, which I think are very important for us. What I can speak to is my own intellectual excitement of the ideas as I've recently encountered them of Öcalan and the people who've gathered in a very creative way to create the Academy of Social Sciences and to launch the Journal of Democratic Modernity. My own article here is called Food and Social Nature, and just a little experience of it. I had just written a piece for a French dictionary of post-capitalism. So I sent it to one of the commune editors to say, what do you think of this for my article? And he said, well, it's very good. And you have all the examples that you need, but you really need to rethink it. And here are 3 short-ish, reasonable, manageable things to read. And I read them very quickly, and it took me a long time to rework the way I'd already been thinking about this. And that's my experience of excitement about the process and about the content. So, I mean, this person, how old is Nick? Who is doing this? Yes. Yeah. Yes, yeah. But I left the process, I finished the process thinking I wished he'd been my thesis supervisor. It was just such a good way to encourage a deepening of something that's already been happening for a long time. So my own journey to this group began when I met Havin at a conference in Siena, Italy, that was organized by various groups, including the Transnational Institute, which I was connected to at that time. And I was invited to speak at one of these quests for an alternative network for an alternative quest. I was invited to speak on ecocide, which that's a good idea. I'll speak on that, but it's not a word I used or a way I thought exactly, but it took me to a new place. So all of it was intriguing, and the conference itself was very exciting. I had been an activist. I helped create, what do you call those things? During the anti-Vietnam War struggle in the US, teach-ins, that's what you call them. And I helped to create them. I was a student of Eric Wolf, who was an amazing anthropologist, who is one of the people here who both political organization. He convinced the American Anthropological Association to take a position on the Vietnam War, which was not something they did in that time, because anthropologists were doing research serving the war effort, and that's not okay. He also introduced a way, Europe and the people without history, a new way of thinking about the world system that was less Eurocentric, that brought in. I also found the energy of that conference reminded me of those teach-ins, but I was a speaker, which was, it's also where I learned the chant, "Women like freedom, Jiyan, Azadi." So I'm pleased to be included in the founding of the Academy and the launch of the campus. I spent my career working in a variety of disciplinary fields, but I think my food has been a unifying thing, but the intellectual space was the world systems world. And it was through food regime analysis that others, Philip McMichael, others, we brought in ecology in a more central way to world systems. The idea of hegemonic transitions is absolutely crucial. The longue durée of Fernand Braudel that was brought in. It also helped to guide that world into ecology and to think about, well, what if politics was based in ecosystems, in rivers and biomes, forests and coast? What the various articles in this journal share is a commitment to holistic analysis. Where ecocide accelerates under capitalist modernity, the vision of democratic confederalism points to a way that indigenous peoples live not only harmoniously, but with fluid boundaries that can be seen in a wider understanding of commons than the ones we've inherited from Europe. In particular, I'm excited right now about the history, it's several years old, the history by Alan Greer called Property and Dispossession, about how indigenous peoples live, expanded. So it's not only capitalism, but also the system of states that has reached a desperately dangerous place since it began 2 centuries ago. And it cannot sustain life. For Canada and settler states especially, ways of knowing of indigenous people, how these ways of knowing reflect and shape different ways of living with places, with earthly processes at all scales. It shifts world systems analysis from trade.
Get it louder a bit.
Oh, okay. I can project from the diaphragm. I can try. From trade to soils as the starting point of inquiry, ways of knowing that become ever more central.
Closer a bit? Just closer.
I can see
There.
that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So one of the main things here that from Öcalan is that there are 2 rivers of history and a way of seeing power as parasitic. I mean, I don't know if that's his term, but that's mine, my way of thinking about it, that the parasite can kill its host, but it suicides if it does. And that may be the moment that we're in. Ecology also gives us a scientific way to think about change, which is a very ancient emphasis. Ecology helps us think about not just resilience and the same system, but how transitions to new stable states can occur. And that is something I would like to pursue for this. In social science, the idea of socio-technical transitions, a dialectic of resistance, appropriation, transformation. If we can put those things together, I think we can make a lot of progress, I hope, in thinking about the situation we're in now, the difficult time of the escalating crises, but the hope for something better to emerge. So this is how I've learned from Öcalan and other thinkers in this movement to rethink the longue durée. and is far longer than capitalism, as Havin was saying, far longer than 500 years. And it puts patriarchy more central than I had, and that I'm starting to learn to do better, even though some of my best friends are feminist theorists. It's the oldest and most dangerous form of oppression. The ideas encouraged by the vision of democratic modernity is a renewal of the ideas I've pursued for a long career. And it's my hope, I think, and the hope of the Academy and of the journal, that other people will find a renewal and a deepening of the work that they've already been doing.
Good news, the books are here.
That's great.
I want to really publicly thank my friends Fred and Deniz for rescuing the books and making them in time somehow. Something that we have not been able to manage. So it's 7:10. We have about 45 to 50 minutes for question and answer. Do you want to manage it yourselves, or do you want me to? Okay, I'll do it.
You can just, yes.
We can be spontaneous.
Yes.
If there's a problem, you can intervene.
I don't think there will be any problem.
I think so.
A self-governing society,
Absolutely.
a commune of sorts.
Yes. Yeah.
Please feel free to ask your questions. Do you want to take a few questions at a time?
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe, yes. Please go ahead.
Thank you. The first thing that comes to mind strikes me as the issue of constitutions. We have constitutions. The Jeffersonian Constitution is actually quite robust, provides for freedoms and equality for all citizens. The Brazilian Constitution, that is verbose, extraordinarily long, provides for checks and balances. It had the Constitution that was instituted in Iraq also was very well crafted, and yet they don't provide what they promise. So the question is now, is the issue here really capitalist or democratic modernity that's the problem? Or is there a sociological issue or anthropological? This whole idea of unifying the two is actually a very good idea. I think Auguste Comte would agree completely that the, how do you say, all the branches of sociology tie together the common, the evolution of a society. We're deconstructing. In a Derrida-esque sense, we're deconstructing society, see what's going wrong. So we have nice structures, but the structures don't work. How does one address the issue of the human nature, of the human desire and greed that corrupts these systems? The turn systems of equality and checks and balances into inverted systems of social disorder and disarray, leading to how do you say, justice systems that punish the innocent rather than protecting those individuals.
Just wondering if the people online can hear the questions, because there were some chats happening with that.
I'm going to ask Christian to. Yes.
You can hear the questions online because the microphone is there here.
Oh, yeah.
But you can still speak loud. And we have one question since I'm here online.
Okay. And then, yes.
William from Montreal first wants to know if the book and journal are available somewhere in Montreal.
They're online.
Right.
They are online available as well.
Online, okay.
The Fondation Kürt.
Yes, they will be at the Kurdish Foundation or
Kurdish Foundation.
Association here.
Okay, that's fantastic. And they ask, how do you teach integrated management rather than silo management? Integrated management versus, I'm not sure if two words were used.
I don't know. There's one more question and then we can have a, don't forget it. In the second round, I will ask you. Please
Thank
go.
you. It's not a question, actually. It was just to suggest to speak with a microphone so we can hear the question, please.
Okay.
It's possible.
Do we have, okay, I don't know if the microphone can go there, but I
could try to speak louder.
yes, please.
Well, this is kind of a big question, but do you think like the evolution of human species and us still like having kind of animal instincts, because like of course we came from apes, do you think that like has contributed to patriarchy and like capitalism?
A big question about humans and like a very palpable distrust to humans, as you can see.
I don't know. I study human environment, so I'm like so curious about this.
That's okay. Thank you.
I think this is gonna get us started really well.
Yes.
Maybe you can talk about the Rojava Constitution as well, which is a document to be read. I'm gonna leave it to you. I'll be back. I have to write the prices of the books now that we have.
Okay. Well, I think I want to go from somewhere else. I think we are being told that all of this is in our nature, like we humans are bad. Who was that guy, the Israel, he lives in Israel? He wrote about exactly.
Okay.
Like it is the seed of badness is all in the Homo sapiens, we don't actually agree with that kind of a narrative. I think when we, not only look at the 5,000 years old of patriarchal hegemony, we also see within these 5,000 years that the majority of the communities and societies are trying to do good, and they are in solidarity, they are not really trying to make war with their neighbors or, drive away the farmer next door or whatever. So I think this kind of convincing us, that something is wrong with us, it's not really the system, but, the human nature is like bad, greedy, has desires, and jealous, and I don't know what, and we don't really agree with that. And I guess, this is why, like, to understand it, we are going so deep in history to understand what kind of change in our mindset was imposed on us, if we look at like the 16th to 18th century Europe, it is so clear, for God's sake, they burned millions of women to be able to open up the area for capitalism and the rule of capitalism, They got rid of a lot of heretics, declared them heretical and devil and I don't know what, and punished them so severely, They made common lands into private lands. And when we say they, we are talking about the early capitalist forces that got together with aristocracy. I mean, it's an interesting duo, but they did this hand in hand in order to be able to implement this way of life. So I would look for ways that thinking changed. I would look at ways into how the social relations were changed.
I'll add something
Yeah,
to that.
yeah.
I think human nature is multiplex. We're capable, great evil and great good. And I think the society draws out different aspects of things that then seem to become natural. I think just as a very short-term thing, we're in a university and I'm an elder now, retired for quite a while. I taught for a long time. I taught for half a century, not as long as patriarchy, but in fact, I was one of the first women to become dominant in sociology, in numerically. And I don't know what difference that made, but I saw a shift in the relation between students and faculty in the expectations and desires of students over that time. We can name it neoliberalism in the 1980s, but the shift from a collective and respectful and engaged way of seeing that was dominant. Some still have it, of course, but they're against the current now, which is very individualistic. And the growth of the bureaucracy that imposed certain ways, very formalistic ways on me of teaching and on students, of their expectations, I think human nature changed. And that's a very short time in a very more or less stable place because people were coming in. But I think it's not that hard to see if you look at your own experiences. Certainly if I look at my own experiences, I've lived in very different ways, ways that could be called more communal and ways that can be called more competitive. And we see it.
Yes, people change, but I would like to insist, and maybe this is why this academy, we find it to be so important to understand what forces people and how much violence is used in this for people to change. And this violence could be economic nowadays, like look at it. I don't know how it is here, but in Europe, people are more and more trying to live vegetarian and vegan and to buy biological stuff. But if you're a poor person, you can't do any of that. I mean, it's a really becoming a class thing. So I think this is why it's so important to understand in the ways in which, the way we perceive questions, the way we perceive its solutions, and why we perceive them. And I think this is where, both sciences in general, but social science comes to be very, very important, so that we can really expose all of this, and not only expose, but how do we then try to create or rebuild social relations in a different way, or looking at things from a different way. I mean, I totally agree with our friend that you can have the best constitution, but what does it matter at the end of the day? Because of all the things that we're talking here, but also because over time, so long as the society is not really organized and taking control of its own life, some group or another is hijacking it. So no matter even how wonderful the constitution in Rojava is, it doesn't really matter. If you cannot have this commune, the moral and political society, I mean, this is why we, the Kurdish Freedom Movement, are changing our ways of vanguardism, of this Leninism, top down. And the reason for that is the society is not doing it, you're doing it, and what does it matter then, so this is why it's so important in Rojava, in Mahmur, in Shengal, in various, in Turkey, Turkish Kurdistan, part of Turkey. We're trying to build up continuously bottom-up structures where the vanguard's role, there's still a role, but this role is not to make the revolution. Its role is to fend off, all these different forces attacking the society, and to make the society aware of it. And the rest, society has to rebuild itself. Because otherwise, another group will come, because, we are all made up of now classes, like male domination is very deep, and really not resolved in the West. Don't think only the women in the Middle East with the black burqa are only experiencing it. We, the women, are experiencing it here with makeup and you know what. So it's so important to then to be able to become aware of the different traits and characteristics we got over the 5,000 years. Both the male and the female and the young. What happened to the way that a communal society lives? I mean, how can we learn from the past, but how do we then, are able to implement it today with where we are? So I think that, it's a fair question, but I think then to say that maybe it's not capitalism's fault is not fair, because, Öcalan calls it, actually lately, he talks of a caustic, like a caste, like the Indian, the way we know, caustic killer at the beginning of time, let's say during Neolithic, and from there onwards, an elite, shamanic, priest kind of male that gains some power. And this is how he, for example, analyzes or interprets the fight between Gilgamesh, or the Gilgamesh epic, that Gilgamesh wasn't really looking for endless life, or what do we call it? Immortality. But he was actually trying to run away from the goddesses, trying to kill him after the first night of marriage, because at the time, during the Neolithic, which is a transition period, actually, from a mother-based society to a patriarchal society, that she knew what the some men could do if they gained power. So maybe it wasn't a proper, solution to what was perceived to be a problem, but this is what they did. After marriage, they killed the strong male, so that never becomes in power, So this is not what we are saying that should be done. But today, for example, when we look at what the Epstein files are telling us, it is telling us that an elite men, either put each other into very, very powerful positions, or they corrupted the ones in powerful positions, and they ran the world. I know Jagland, for example, from very close. He was the prime minister of Norway. Then he became the head of the Nobel Peace Prize Foundation. Then he became the general secretary of the Council of Europe. And wherever he went, he destroyed every organization he went to. And everybody then used to think that he was the spy of the US. No, really, it's no job. Sent to destroy, deconstruct that organization. And he did that with Council of Europe. He gave the Nobel Prize to Obama and the European Union. So what I'm trying to say is that the problem here then we see is that while some, misuse, abuse powers, the others are just watching. Why are we just watching? We don't want to lose our job. We don't want to, if we lose our job and then, this, that, and the other, exactly, So what do we try to do? Either we try to become as invisible as possible so we don't lose our job, or we become a predator, just like them. And this is how this whole thing is run at the end of the day. Who are the soldiers that are fighting? Who are the people that are making the technology for weapons, you know. We can make the list go on and on and on, you know. But I don't agree that, you know, we are so bad that we do this willingly. But I think that over the thousands of years, it has become okay to oppress women because we are used to all the benefits that come from it, you know? We don't see it anymore because that is so free, and, you know, either we say, yeah, they like to do it, or, you know, they are used to doing it, or whatever we'd like to say. So all I'm trying to say is that the only way out of this, and this is why in my speech I said, you know, within the Kurdish society, we have experienced this. We have seen that men can change. We have seen women can change, because women is also highly patriarchal. We are not talking about something, you know, just because we are women, we are so good. No, this is also not true. But this can only change if we are willing. And this can only change if we are organized and willing. A will on its own is not enough, you know. I mean, I think it was David Graeber that said, you know, Öcalan, although being in prison for 27 years, he is still convincing the Kurdish people to do good. You know, like today, Israel, the US, everybody is telling the Kurds to become nationalistic. It's their time. They should have a nation state, and they are behind them. And then Kurds look around, no one's behind them. It's only to use them to fight Iran, you know, Syria, Turkey, and Iraq. And what does the left do? Left believes all this. Some left, not all of them. They look at us and say, you're in bed with US and Israel. We're the ones dying every day. You know, Jolani is in bed with Israel and US. Turkey is in bed with Israel and US, you know. So all of these are in bed, but in order to be able to make the Kurdish struggle, which talks about non-state formations, they try to make it invisible. I guess the way we look at revolutionary violence has changed. It has transformed into self-defense. And this is, of course, is enabling us to defend ourselves in the face of attacks. And this will continue to be the case. The big chanting in Iran, Jiyan, Azadi, woman, life, freedom. This is, of course, the struggle of the Kurdish people in Roshilati Kurdistan, in Iranian Kurdistan, but it is coined by Öcalan. I love to tell this story because there is a huge thinking behind it. You know, we're not just saying things out of the blue. What is the connection? All those who think that they are the creators of this rebellion, I'd like to ask them, where does it come from? Now, Öcalan is looking at how societies lived before patriarchy at the same time, to learn from it. And he sees the Kurdish origins in Mesopotamia and very old peoples. Now, from etymology of Kurdish, he realized that the root for the words woman and life is the same. Jin. The root is the same. So he came to the conclusion, if it's the same, there's a huge connection between woman and life. The root is the same. Because language is at the end an expression of both the culture and social relations. What is culture? What is language otherwise? And in his research or search for the state. What is it? You know, where is it coming from? He went to the Sumerians and he saw the embryo of state in there. But he also noticed the word for Azadi or freedom is amargi in the Sumerian language. And amargi means going back to the womb of the mother. Take it physical, take it as the yearning for a woman-led society and life. So this is how the connection is made. And this is how people embracing it and owning it, they understand the connection between all of these, you know. So maybe I am, you know, like making it very long and a trajectory of up and down, but all I'm trying to say is that even 5,000 years ago, this newly made slaves were aware that a straying from a woman-based society means slavery. 5,000 years ago. So I think for us to think that we deserve this because how bad we are as humans, I think is maybe not a way to go. But it is very important, of course, that we are at this point. How do we make mechanisms, and this is what is being done in Rojava and in different places, how do you make mechanisms that people don't go back to things that they are used to? You know, like women goes back to, because it's hard, you know, it's really hard. I know a lot of people like in the West too, to say, you know, like I am burned out because I go to so many meetings, you know? So on top of daily tasks, then you go into meetings and you battle things out, you know, maybe not a bad battle, but, you know, you go in an organized way. What the Rojava revolution represents is that all those that were oppressed by the system before were organized autonomously. You know, this meant the women, this meant the Armenians, this meant the Assyrians, you know, the different peoples, as well as this meant the youth, you know. This meant, of course, other communes, because you couldn't actually plant trees in Rojava. You know, this was even banned. You couldn't speak your mother tongue. This was even banned. So all of these banned things, you know, to make mechanisms so that everyone is represented in a certain commune in an organized way, makes it, you know, a struggle to resurface or rebuild what is acceptable for everybody. So in 10 years, you may be at this level. In maybe 20 years, you'll be at another level. But what is important is that academies and intellectual work continues, both in these communes, as well as political struggles and etc. So, you know, without this, the best constitution will be just a piece of paper, you know. And we are hoping to keep this going. Because once this stops, I guess it will become like the Soviet Union. The Soviets will be crushed and you'll just have the Union in there. And, you know, and it goes to capitalism as we see. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have time for more questions. Please, go ahead.
Okay, me? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, I'll speak loud so everybody can hear. Can you hear me in the back?
Yes.
Okay, I'm really enjoying both of your talks. And there's a question that comes to mind in response to the fundamental need that Havin mentioned, the necessity of willingness and organization in order to get from A to be. There's a third necessity, which is alliances. Because without allies, you can't get anywhere in this world. And I wonder if you could briefly illustrate for us or situate for us where the Kurdish freedom movement fits in the spectrum of revolutionary anti-capitalist struggle. Who are your allies? The Kurdish freedom movement started off as a Marxist-Leninist venture. Fortunately, those who are not Marxist-Leninists, it has jettisoned that baggage and is much closer to the Luxembourgian from the bottom up non-vanguardist movement. But where are you situated, Öcalan's movement, on the left spectrum from the state capitalist Russian, Soviet, Chinese, Cuban model, and the model that is in Mexico with the Zapatistas? Where do you fit in, and who are your friends and allies that will come to that academy and you can sing together in a choir of liberation?
Very difficult indeed.
And we'll take both, and then is there some?
My apologies if this is redundant because I came in late. So if it is, just scrap it. But I was curious because to me, I guess the word modernity conjures a lot of what you were encapsulating under capitalist modernity. I work in the environmental humanities, and I think of modernity, it conjures for me a lot of domination of nature, you know, the damming of rivers, the things that the Frankfurt School has critiqued in terms of the parallel domination of nature and human beings that are mutually reinforcing. So what is this kind of counter-hegemonic concept of modernity that emerges in the world you're operating in, I guess is my question.
Okay. I think this is very easy maybe to say something too. I mean, Öcalan really mentions that for not having a better word, he used this, but he is using capitalist modernity in a way to show that, you know, it doesn't just consist of capital or capitalism, you know, that capitalist modernity stands on three pillars. One is capitalism, the other is the nation state, and the other is industrialism. And he also says that, you know, like Marx too did not really work on the nation state or the industrialism so much. And therefore we have a confusion, you know, about how bad or good the state is, why was it seen progressive, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So in that sense, and he also coins and says that, well, maybe we can look at modernity as something that is during that time that it was being lived, you know. So like if we look at status civilization, then we talk about the dialectical part of it as democratic civilization. So if we're talking of capitalist modernity, we are talking as its dialectical part, democratic modernity, which he then, you know, describes its three pillars, as I maybe mentioned, as democratic confederalism, as a non-state governance instead of the nation state, you know, democratic nation, and also, you know, instead of industrialism, ecological industry or industry. He doesn't.
Technology is different.
Exactly, technology is different, but the ism is a bit more different. So, but now for allies, maybe you want to say something about that, and maybe, you know, the language collective. We really want to also, and Öcalan has been calling for it. You know, like, you know, there needs to be a language of this also, of course, and this is why people are sometimes confused when we say democracy. They just understand the democracy.
Liberal democracy.
Exactly, as everybody understands it today. So We are in the process of making a political dictionary too. But, you know, also we would like to find different terms. Who are the allies? Gosh, it's been so difficult. Can I say that? I mean, sometimes I say, you know, like PKK was a Molotov cocktail of its day, right? Because, you know, it was born in 1978, right? At the height of Cold War, you know, and the end of national liberation struggles had come, you know, and suddenly you have this movement that it's not only enough that they are, you know, Kurdish freedom movement, but on top of it, they are Marxist-Leninist, you know, like there are no supporters anyway. You know, four colonizing states are completely, you know, trampling all over Kurds. You know, the US and everybody is completely anti-socialist, communist, you know, and on top of it, no help from the Soviet Union at all, or any of the other states. So yeah, who were the allies at the beginning? It was the Palestinian FFLP at the Bekaa Valley, who provided some space for the PKK in the very late 70s, like 79, 80, you know, until the invasion of Israel into Lebanon. And there, I think it was about 12 militants of the PKK that were also killed in the clashes to defend Lebanon from the invasion. So, I mean, basically, for the minute that it was established, the PKK, the Kurdish Freedom Movement, to this date, it's always been the odd one out, you know, always putting on the agenda something that nobody wants to see, you know, because it destroys the narrative, you know. The Turkish left before the military coup of 1980 were very progressive, and its leaders recognizing and acknowledging the Kurdish question and the need for a common struggle. But after the military coup, all these were totally destroyed. A lot of spies put in. They became very chauvinistic, you know, and did not want to do anything with the Kurds and deemed them nationalist. You know, because why was there a need to have a separate Kurdish organization? We were going to have a workers' revolution and everybody was going to free anyway. Everybody was going to be free anyway. But speaking Turkish while Kurdish was banned, of course, you know. And I am sure other stories can be told from Iran, Iraq, and Syria. Because when we talk about the Middle East, we usually forget about the colonial practices of the different states there. Then we talk more about anti-Americanism, you know, then ties a lot of anti-American under the anti-imperialist talk around the world, different people, and they begin to see the Kurds as a game breaker, you know? Like, why do you have to exist? We heard it from Venezuela, you know, like in the past, of course, not these days, like maybe 20, 30 years ago. Yeah, don't say too much about Iran because they are really struggling against America. You know, like don't mention Iran. Yeah, but I am dying. You know, I am dying in Iran, you know. So in this equation of American, you know, now Russian or whatever imperialisms, Israel in the Middle East, now again, all of these different forces, this is why I said there's a confusion, you know, want the Kurds dead or away because they don't fit the narrative. You know, what do you do with the Kurds? you know. So, I mean, we are telling these states that they should find a compromise with the Kurds, you know, to Turkey, to Iran, to Syria, to Iraq, because we are saying much worse is coming to the Middle East. And nobody can face this alone, you know. And these states have to become democratic if they want to survive. The problem is here that we are right in the middle of this warfare. You know, when Jolani and his jihadists were trying very quick to break through Rojava, it was for the Hashti Shabi, but in the middle, they wanted to eradicate the Kurds. And this is why the narrative, if you say that Kurds are in bed with Israel and America, is a very good narrative, because then you will justify and legitimize why you killed and eliminated Kurds. And this is how the world is thinking all the time. You know, when Netanyahu does, an Israel state does what it does in Gaza, you know, it puts it in such a narrative that it's okay. They were like this because of that, and this is why it happened. You know, so what we're trying to do, you know, of course, the Zapatistas and a lot of different social movements and indigenous movements in Latin America are allies. Just a week ago, Bengi was at another conference in Bogota that the Women's Freedom Movement organized. And maybe she can say a few things about that too. But it was amazing. You know, we are discussing with many different movements to forge a way together, out together. Abdullah Öcalan is, from his prison cell, is suggesting a communal international, you know, and he's saying we're even becoming late because we are not acting together, capitalist modernity, instead of collapsing, is prolonging its lifetime, and on top of it, it's transitioning. And this is dangerous because now it's unstable. Maybe we can, like the Soviet Union of its time, come out of it with something. But if we are not, as my friend tells, you know, forging strong allies, you know, us resisting in Rojava maybe saved Iran a couple of more days. But this is not saving anybody, and maybe even not ourselves, you know. So allies, I agree, is very important, but we have to have reciprocal somewhere, you know. I mean, we are jolting the Turkish left, we are jolting the Iranian left, the Arabic, you know, but over and over, as if, you know, like there is an agreement not to do that, you know. And of course, allies elsewhere too. Like, for example, Brazil. I mean, this campism, you know, like with Russia and China, you know, we used to have okay relations with some of the movements over there, the big movements. But due to this campism, we are seeing that who is not on that camp is not being, you know, seen or talked about or supported. Now, these things are very, very dangerous because it is serving actually capitalism itself, you know. So I don't know, I could go on forever, but you know, we are trying, small or big, you know, with trying to build this communal international as well. And on this, you will hear from us more very soon.
Just maybe one last round of questions. I already have two hands, so Bashir, please go ahead. And yes.
Thank you for this, and thanks for organizing it, Bengi, and everyone here. I want to just about your last answer and what you were talking about, the change of and also believing in change. PKK itself changed a lot, and Öcalan changed his thoughts since the 80s, and giving up the Marxist-Leninist ideas into more than self-defense. In Rojava itself, I left in the beginning of the Rojava revolution. I would say there was still things were being figured out. And over these years, I personally have struggled, and many of Syrian Kurds have also struggled with two different levels of how to interact with different bodies of the revolution, I would say, or the self-determination institutions. One is that the majority of the Kurdish people, a lot of them still hold strongly into the nationalist idea of having a nation state. The Kurdistan's a dream, which is, I understand why it's hard to give up, because you don't believe in you don't have trust in your surroundings. On the other side, I critique that the authoritarian mentality has remained in many aspects of the party or its bodies here and there, that it's in practice on the ground has not reflected the same ideas that we talk about in the social contract of northeast of Syria. How do you grapple on these contradictions on one hand, and also to keep the survival mode that, you know, you have to remain and protect your people?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, my question is very similar to his in that in the matter of especially translating the ideas and especially coming from out of the Rojava Revolution into applying them here locally with many different cultures and many different aspects that, you know, many factors that helped lead the revolution, such as armed resistance and collective resistance and self-sustainability, not very much having a foothold here in the West and in other places around the world. How is it possible for, you know, people in the left, especially people in this room maybe, to sort of apply and translate those ideas politically, practically, economically, socially? I find it very hard, you know, the phrase of think global, act local. I find it hard to connect these two ideas. And the more I read about things happening back in Kurdistan, the more I find it harder to apply it here, especially as a Kurdish immigrant.
I mean, we're almost out of time, so I won't take any more questions unless there are like follow-ups or like burning need to express. We'll be hanging out for a bit after, so you can nudge them and, I don't know, shake them. So it's yours.
Okay, I mean, it's a very good question. For the past 14 years, I mean, there's always been some kind of organization in Rojava, in Syria. It has been, of course, very limited, and also only in the form of political education. Again, of course, women's autonomous organization to a certain extent under the regime of the Assad regime. But of course, we have a totally new scenario, not only, you know, just in Rojava with the totally autonomous situation that we found ourselves in the past 14 years. And I guess we created that through our political approach. Because even at the time, people found it very puzzling that the Kurds wouldn't attack the Assad forces, only would respond if they would attack. And this created a very much of a safe haven where a lot of things grew. A lot of organizations grew, you know, like education from primary school to to university level grew, you know, a lot of different things grew, and, you know, like health system in some ways, from, you know, herbal to like natural kind of thing to more formal health. And, you know, I can count a lot of things like legal system. There was an interest in trying to find how a more social-based legal system can be also established alongside more like state-like, or, you know, I don't want to say state-like, but like for formal procedures, like if you kill a person, I don't know, or whatever, you know. So, but of course, you know, 14 years is a very short time. And I think for those who think that revolutions happen overnight, I have a bad news for you. You know, it doesn't happen that way. And it doesn't just not only happen, you know, with the leaderships, but also with the peoples. And on top of it, of course, in these 14 years, there was not only a lot of attacks, and a lot of cities were detached from the Northeast Syria mechanism, but also like US and others tried to hollow out through their NGOs and I don't know what inside the revolution as well. And on top of it, they really tried to strengthen other, like the KDP linked NKS. You know, they are supposed to be very nationalistic, but they demand that there is no Kurdish education and that genealogy is not a lesson in schools. So what am I trying to say? What I'm trying to say is that there is a huge effort to lure Kurds into nation statism, religionism, you know, all of this, telling them that they will have big brothers protecting them, you know. And on the other hand, of course, people or the local leaders, maybe with not as much knowledge, but as this target or goal in front of them, or that they believe in this goal, they try with those willing and organizing, you know, to drive this to a place where, you know, there's freedom and there is, you know, peoples living together, religions living together, you know, etc. And at this, I think we're not there, but they made a lot of steps, huge steps. I mean, you know, the art scene, you know, art, theater, music, all of these developed quite a bit. But as I said, you know, we are not there yet, obviously. But I guess this is the beauty of, you know, how can we restructure what we have lost in 5,000 years? So it's important that the assemblies and mechanisms really work there, so that, as we talked in the beginning, you know, that we do not have authoritarian people, you know, becoming more, they don't have more power of words than others. So this is the struggle that will continue to go on there. And each time, of course, we are able to do this better. You know, there's more developments in Rojava than normally. You had asked, yeah, I think, okay, maybe there's a hot war going there, but I think what is happening here is, from my superficial understanding, maybe I shouldn't say too much about what's going on here, but from what I understand, just because Trump said a few words, you are extremely, like here, lenient towards militarization and becoming nationalist, you know, with even just a mention of a couple of things. So I guess, you know, it's so important then to see what's an alternative here than either Trump or the nationalist, you know, way of doing things here. I mean, as I said, my understanding is superficial, but I would expect that a lot of things like this would be developing all over the world. I am seeing already in Europe, I don't know about here, but you know, the healthcare system and education system is lacking more and more, and it's becoming weaker and weaker and weaker, you know. And who is
The
to,
military.
yeah,
It's like-
yeah, it's all going to the
it's
military.
Nation state system.
And not only that, why would they look after you now? Why would the state, you know, really look after you? The welfare state, if you listen to Rubio's speech in Munich, is well over, you know. And the reason why those kind of welfare states were made up were because of the colonial struggles, and it was really interesting. I would really urge all of you to read his speech, you know. So it is now telling people that, you know, no more welfare states, no more all those good services that were provided. So what are we going to do in places like this? You know, are we going to work harder so we can get private healthcare and private schooling and etc.? Some will do that for sure. But what will happen to the others? You know, how do we do this? How can we then have, you know, assemblies of doctors, assemblies of, I mean, let's think a little bit more long term. What do we do with food? I mean, your situation is a lot harder. How many months of winter here? Oh my God. You know?
So, I mean,
Yeah.
on the ground organization.
So, I mean, we have to make jokes also, of course, to continue to live and to sustain our living. But I think, you know, one should not think that you are not prone to anything here, that everything will go as it does. But I think each time that the system is able to advance, I think we have losses all around the world. Hard-won gains are being lost one by one, and we are being convinced as to why. So I would say, if you want to learn more, come to the academy, and we'll talk a lot more. Thank you very much.
I'm not going to say anything after that. Thank you for joining us. Please take a look at the books in the journal.